Hey everybody, Alex here, and welcome to another video. A Base to the Past, Chrono Cross. So, Chrono Cross, a somewhat divisive game when it came out, yet I feel like everybody these days, particularly my age category, being in like their 30s, maybe a little bit younger, perhaps a little bit older, tend to look back at this game pretty fondly. But, at the time when Chrono Cross came out, I really appreciated it. I thought it was a phenomenal game. But let's put it in perspective here. When Chrono Cross came out, everybody was full-on expecting a sequel to Chrono Trigger. What they got was something totally different. Instead of time manipulation, we're talking about dimensional manipulation, which, if you can think about it, one stretch of the imagination is still technically playing with time if two dimensions go along one side and you happen to transcend to another dimension slightly ahead of schedule or slightly behind schedule. That is technically time travel. Steins Gate teaches us that much, as well as some other movies pertaining to the butterfly effect. Alright, maybe I overthought it a bit, but the thing with Chrono Cross to me is I thought it was a phenomenal game back then. I think it's an excellent game right now, and I think it has by far one of the best soundtracks I have ever heard in a game. So many themes within the music itself. Different styles, use of sitars, we have some guitar work in there too, which is phenomenal. Sitar, in case you don't know, is actually, I guess you could say, the Indian version, from the Asian region of a guitar. Has a very metallic sound. They use a lot of Middle Eastern sounding, obviously, scales, which is where you tend to get like a lot of that sound where you're like, oh yeah, like a Middle Eastern riff. Like if you think of Desert Rose by Sting, you have some of those different scales going on in there for a little bit of musical reference. But with Chrono Cross, with me, the music was great, the gameplay was great. I love the fact that I went into it totally blind. That was probably one of the best things I could have ever done when playing that game, because I didn't know what to expect. But there is a little bit of a story that goes along with why I wanted to talk about Chrono Cross specifically today. So when Chrono Cross came out, at least from what I remember, it was during that whole Summer of Adventure thing that Squaresoft, I think, were they still Squaresoft at the time? I believe they were still Squaresoft at the time. Or they had that weird partnership with Electronic Arts where they were like helping them publish in the States, something along those lines. But they were doing this whole like Summer of Adventure campaign from what I remember, and there was going to be Chrono Cross, there was going to be, I think it was Legend of Mana, Threads of Fate, I think, Brave Fencer Musashi was not included, maybe it was Bushido Blade 2. I think there was one other game. But it was interesting at that time because, I was really into games, my friends and I were really into games, but we always had blinders on. So games would come out, which is funny, looking back obviously within the collecting scene, people go back and re-experience their childhood like I did, and then they discover new things. I think probably not being as adept at the internet or having such access to the internet and still relying on those print publications like EGM and whatnot, tons of games came out, but you probably only heard about 5. And in this case, with this whole Summer of Adventure campaign or whatever it was, I only knew about Chrono Cross. And so did my friends, but that was really because we'd only played Chrono Trigger. And all of us were excited, and I remember it being really, really hot out. And I actually did not go to Software Etc. to buy Chrono Cross. I actually didn't have it. So my friend and I, we went to this local, I guess you could say, mom and pop video game store. They were technically a chain, but it was like within the New York State area. They're actually still around, but they do specifically mail order, I think, at this point. I know they had a store up in, I want to say East Harlem at one point. It's called Game Express, actually. Yeah, Game Express. And, two of us walked in there and we went over to the guy, we're like, hey, do you have Chrono Cross? And of course they always had it, and sometimes they probably even had stuff a day or two ahead of time, and they probably charged $10 more. But you know what? We didn't care. He bought a copy, I bought a copy. We went back to his house, he played it, and then we argued who got to keep the save data. And it's really funny too, because I mentioned this to him the other day when we were out at some event. And I say, hey, remember we got Chrono Cross? He goes, yeah, you son of a bitch, you ran off with my freaking memory card. I don't remember that. But he seems to remember it because he had to read through the whole thing over again, and he only had one memory card, which I took home, So he had to go have his brother buy another one with his allowance money so they could actually proceed with the game. And then his brother, later on, he played most of the game because he was home more often. My friend at the time, I think he was going to summer school, and his brother passed everything so he didn't have to, and his brother basically sat at home all day playing Chrono Cross. But here's where it gets kind of odd. So once we both started playing the game at the same time, we never talked about it. There was this whole essence of discovery, the summer of adventure, and just going through the game and just trying to see what you could see. And there was tons of recruitable characters in this game, a metric ton of them. And it was really cool to see where I focused on trying to get specific characters, just futzing around until I figured out how to get them. And his brother and him would get totally different characters, or they would get them at different points of the game than I did. Now, I don't remember how factual any of this is in terms of timing within the scope of the game, but at the time, for me, my own memory, it just seemed like we were, again, going at the same time, but going back and forth within our own different dimensions, I guess you could say. So it's kind of interesting on that standpoint. But then something really, really weird happened. I reached a certain point on Disc 1, going into Disc 2, where I think if I remember correctly, it was like a boss or just some really, really difficult fight. And the game kept freezing at that point. I beat the boss 10, 15 times, and it kept freezing. Now, what's really upsetting and really strange was I had the same sort of thing happen with me on Lunar Silver Star back on the Sega CD. I could beat the Black Dragon as much as I wanted, but the disc would not progress forward. No idea why, not a scratch on the disc, it just happened to be defective like that. So in this case, I was really heartbroken. You know, I had pumped in so many hours into this game, playing through it, discovering new things. Summer of Adventure, I remember being really, really hot. I loved the music. I wanted to see where the story was going, and I wanted to ultimately see where this game kind of crossed into, into Chrono Trigger, because up until this point, not so much other than a little bit of the themality within the music. But now my disc was screwed up, so I called my friend and I said, listen dude, I don't know what happened. My disc is messed up. And he goes, so funny you should say that. My disc 1, I can't progress past a certain part. I was like, wait, what? He's like, yeah. And then he described the area he was in. And I was like, oh, I passed that part. But you see, I'm at the end of disc 1, I can't get onto disc 2. Every time I try to do it, it just locks up and freezes. So he's like, okay, so we switched discs. I gave him my disc 1, he gave me my disc 2, and guess what? It worked. How strange is that? Okay, maybe I'm making it out to be a little bit stranger than it really is, but if you think about it, we both went to the same store at the same time, bought it at on the exact same day. These games probably came from the same distributor that brought it on the same truck. I think that's kind of strange that this particular instance happened, and this was a ways after we bought the game, a couple of weeks actually. I played through the game, loved it, swapped this back with him so he could progress in it, and he loved it too. And this is a game that the two of us really look back at fondly, but it's kind of funny at the same time when, you know, I mentioned it to him the other day before, which is really what gave me the idea for this video. I was like, hey man, remember when we played Chrono Cross? And he's like, yeah, how is it so strange that you and I both got the different defective discs? Like that, and by chance, the two of us bought both of these copies. That is just, to him, was weird. But if you think about it in the whole, now this is where I'm going a little over the head. This game really ties according to crossing dimensions, crossing different areas of reality, which you could technically say is a form of time travel. But in this case, my reality, quote unquote, kind of ended where my disc got corrupted, and his ended at another point where his disc got corrupted, even though we were going along the same path in terms of finishing the game. By crossing the discs, we were able to continue forward. Now, I don't know. I know I'm being really, really out there with this one, but to me it's just really interesting because the whole theme really went between the music, the story, the characters, and in the way I actually experienced this game. I had that cross part of it. So for me, this game really has kind of a special meaning because this guy is really my best friend. I'll be totally honest. He knows it. And this is also the same kid that I mentioned that had my old Super Nintendo games from a while back when I did that video and I got somewhat emotional on camera. Our friendship has been around since 1994, alright? So, that's a long ass time. But it was really, really cool just to be able to experience this at the same time as him, but not really, because we were both going along two different paths to get to the same end result. Once we both finished the game, of course we discussed it, but if you haven't played Chrono Cross, it's one of those games where I feel like even if you really don't like the concept behind it not really being a sequel to Chrono Trigger, technically, it does have some influences, so don't worry. I really do think it's one of those special games that we'll never ever have again. If Square came out today and said, we're doing a Chrono Cross remake, or HD remaster, or whatever, I'd be excited. I would probably pick it up, but to be totally honest, I don't think that same experience that I just described would ever happen again. Plus, it would probably be on one disc at that point. But there you have it. I've been Alex, and I'll see you all in the next video.